I believe that Terrarians often speedrun the game to Moonlord and never take their time on their worlds. I want to change that. So over the course of a year, I'll be playing on this one world, with each stage of progression being blocked until the start of a new month. I'm doing this so I can seriously take my time in each stage of Terraria's progression and see what it has to offer. So for the month of September, I've only been allowed to defeat Duke Fishron and the Martian invasion. Otherwise, I can make no other form of progression. This is what happened. But before that, today's video is sponsored by Pixel Art. Pixel Art is a free online pixel art platform where people have made some pretty cool stuff. Now, I'm no artist, but their platform has many tools and is intuitive to use, allowing someone like me to create masterpieces like this. And they didn't ask me to do this, but if you create any art using their platform, join my Discord and share your art there, and maybe I'll put it in the end screen or something. I don't know, I don't plan things. Only this month and 2 more, and I'm already feeling a bit sad at the idea of this whole thing coming to an end, but I got to put that out of my mind. There's still plenty to do, so let's have some fun. Duke Fishron is my favorite vanilla boss in the game, and the Razorblade Typhoon is my favorite weapon, so I'm super excited to finally have Duke Fishron unlocked. And ever since I learned that Fishron wings were really good, I have another reason to get ready to fight him. This is Master Mode, and I think Duke's difficulty increases exponentially as you raise the difficulty, but at the same time, I only learned that the final phase has a pattern a few months ago during my first medium core run. Since then, I haven't fought Duke, so I'm not sure how this knowledge will improve my performance. I only know that it allowed me to beat him after struggling for quite a bit in medium core, so hopefully it'll help here too. So after collecting 12 truffle worms and adding them to the small collection of 3 I'd gathered earlier in the run, I went straight to the ocean to get to fighting. This may also very well be the most prepared for Duke Fishron that I've ever been. In most runs, since I'm not taking my time, I won't necessarily have all the best gear, but since this is 1 year 1 world, I have plenty to work with. And the first Duke Fishron fight went as smoothly as it possibly could. A mixture of my Razor Pine, the Spectre armor, and even the Snowman cannon, and the knowledge of his final form's pattern led me to an easy victory on the first attempt, and boy does it feel good. Maybe my chronic case of skill issue is finally going away, but of course, even those who suffer from skill issue can get lucky, and after acquiring a bubble gun, I was ready for round 2. When the bubble gun was first added, it quickly became one of my favorite weapons, and I don't think there are too many other people out there who use this thing with any amount of frequency. I'm not sure, but I think it got nerfed at one point and I stopped using it for a while afterwards, but this old favorite of mine proved it still had plenty to offer me. It does more damage than the Razor Pine by a considerable margin, though I suppose that should be expected since it's a drop later in progression, but I think its short range chases people away from it. But since Duke Fishron relentlessly dashes at you, he often charges right into the bubbles, making this weapon one of the best ones to use against him in my opinion. Now I might have won using that, but there's something else I've never done, but like a cat, I got curious. What is Duke Fishron like when he's enraged? What happens when you lead him away from the ocean? Well, let's find out.
Oh, he's getting fast. Oh, I've never fought an enraged Duke Fishron before. Oh no. Oh, that was worth it.
Okay, I never in a million years would have thought he was that gosh darn powerful. Maybe later in the month I'll attempt this again, but now I know I'll have to adjust my strategy away from running in a straight line since Duke Fishron is so fast. Now that I've had my fun, I return to actually trying to beat Duke Fishron, but I was more or less trading blows with him. He would win once, I would win one, he would win one, I would win one, he would win one. It was far from consistent, though I guess looking back at it now, there was definitely a pattern, but I wasn't interested in going back and forth. No Fishron wings had dropped yet, and they're supposedly quite rare, so I ain't gonna waste time losing. In that effort, I grabbed some potions and got to work, and either these potions did the trick or I started doing better because I didn't lose another fight for the duration of those potions, tallying up 5 more victories. I didn't get any of the Fishron wings, but I'm pretty sure I got all the other drops from him, which is great, including the Razorblade Typhoon. And fun fact, the Razorblade doesn't actually do as much damage as the bubble gun, but I guess if it did, then the bubble gun would truly be obsolete, what with the Typhoon's insanely good range and homing capabilities. I also stumbled upon the Rain song during these fights and figured I'd play you a little song. Now, we don't want to burn through everything Duke Fishron right in the first week, so I turned my attention to the Old One's army. I have never once beaten the 3rd tier of this event pre-Moonlord, and gosh darn it, I'm dedicated to finally accomplishing that feat. After all, I wanted to actually use Betsy's weapons on tier for once, but the problem is the Old One's army is stupidly tough. There's a reason I've never beaten it before, and I refuse to use cheesing strategies. I want to do this legit. The first fight, though, put quite the dent into my optimism. I barely managed to get to wave 6 before I died, resulting in the crystal perishing as well. Even the beginning phases had given me trouble, and at this point, I have nearly the best gear a guy could ask for. So I had to think hard about what I could do to better my chances. First step was to reforge the Razor Blade to Mythical, and then I made a Queen Spider Staff for those extra few sentries. Maybe they don't do a lot of damage, but they can slow down the flying enemies. I then made sure to use the Nimbus Rod and replace the Sanguine Staff with the Tempest Staff. It wasn't much, but the event went a whole lot smoother. This time I got to Betsy for the first time in 3rd tier Old One's army in Master Mode. I also don't even really know her patterns since I typically ignore them as I tear her apart with a Zenith, but now I actually have to pay attention or else she'll kill me. But it didn't matter, I focused on her so much that the crystal was destroyed just as she hit half health. But that took quite a while to get her to that point. How on earth could I do better than that? What can I do to increase my damage? I tried again, but was killed during the fight. To unwind, I farmed for the Rod of Discord a little and then sat around for several minutes waiting for a Martian probe. I have watched all of the optimization videos and always hear people say these things spawn easily, but I can never get them to spawn, no matter how hard I try. But all the same, I skip them a lot of the times because I don't necessarily need what they have, and because they never spawn, I figure I might as well just not bother. Relogic, can you make a summon for these things? Like, in pre-hard mode, there's Goblin Scouts that drop Tattered Cloths. What if there was an Alien Scout? Like a hard mode alternative to the Goblin Scout? I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas. I kind of like that now. Now, I'm not entirely sure if anything from the Martian invasion would be helpful for me at this moment, but I might as well collect all the stuff. Last month, the Martians spawned on accident, but I couldn't kill a single saucer. But this time, I took one down on the first try, and it dropped the Electrosphere Staff, which, if you haven't tried it, is actually really good. I died to another saucer, killed one, and got the Influx Waiver, and then another saucer despawned on me, and I didn't even know you could get too far away from these things for that to happen, and then one last saucer dropped the Xeno Pomper. Man, both range weapons. Maybe I'll have to try the Ranger build against the army? But I'm out of time this week to do that, so I spent what little time I had left farming for the Rod of Discord to no avail once again. But before we continue, I want to remind you that I will be throwing 1 stick of dynamite at the end of the year for every subscriber I have. So if you enjoy the content, consider subscribing. I'm still going for 100,000, though perhaps that's a pipe dream at this juncture. Another week and I have my eyes set on the Old One's army. Like I said last week, I've never been able to take down Betsy without using the Zenith and other endgame gear, so the idea of finally being able to accomplish this feat is too tantalizing to give up. Perhaps some gear from the Empress Elite would be helpful in this battle, but since I can't fight her until next month, I'll give it my best try without any of that. I didn't make any adjustments to my strategy in this battle. Last time I got Betsy down to half health and hoped that if I just played it a bit better, I'd be able to overcome her. I did do a little experimentation though, using the Electrosphere launcher a time or two, and although it handles these waves pretty well, its incredibly short range made it hard to use against both sides of this event, so I stuck to the Razorblade Typhoon primarily. After some struggle and managing to keep the crystal more safe than I had before, Betsy spawned and the battle began. This struggle, however, reminded me why I struggle with killing Betsy fast enough. The Razorblade, although a great weapon, it's not very good at targeting a specific enemy. It would often hit Betsy and then attack other enemies rather than continuing to hit the boss. This might not seem bad because killing off the other enemies helped the crystal survive longer, but it wasn't enough damage to deal with the more tanky foes, so eventually the time would just run out. I attempted to use the bubble gun, but I still don't get Betsy's movements or patterns, and due to its short range, I wasn't able to deal consistent damage without putting myself too close to the dragon, and so I lost the battle. When I got home, I decided potions would be necessary. Part of me feels like this event shouldn't require potions, but I'm not sure why I feel that way. I grabbed a few of the basics and placed some new banners I had earned from the last time. Other than potions, I still didn't change my strategy too much, but I at least did have a new plan where Betsy was concerned. The Electrosphere launcher has just as high a damage output as the Razorblade Typhoon, if not better, but I would be able to focus its damage more on Betsy, so then I planned on entirely ignoring the enemies on the ground, focusing purely on Betsy with the launcher. If I could kill her fast enough, then that would be enough. I got to the dragon doing even better than last time, but the Electrosphere launcher was not nearly as good for this fight as I had hoped it would be. I did do real good damage when I hit it, but I missed far too often, although the greater problem would seem to be my flight time. I used the tree mount to get from either side of the arena before the battle and always forgot to switch to the Witch's Broom for Betsy, so I kept falling to the ground where several enemies would hit me and make the whole thing far more difficult than it needed to be. So after that failure, I added a second layer of platforms to avoid that problem next time. I also grabbed more potions than I normally would, probably even more than I have for any of the bosses this entire run. This time when I got to Betsy, I used the Blizzard Staff. Last month, I didn't see much use for this thing. Its damage is about as good as a Razorblade, and yet it's harder to aim. But this fight proved me wrong, and now I look at the Blizzard Staff in a new light. Perhaps its damage output still isn't exactly greater than the Razorblade, but it is still more targeted, and this allowed me to, at long last, defeat Betsy.
It's a little more. Yes! Oh my goodness, yes! Yes! Let's go!
Now it's time to see what Betsy dropped, and it's the Flying Dragon, which is actually the weapon I wanted the most. I wanted to see if this thing really is better than the Terrablade, and we'll test it later. For now, I have realized I need to once again extend my trophy room. There are only 3 more bosses after Betsy, and since I updated this build a short time ago, I was able to much more easily finish the build. Though maybe I'll have to make a special spot for the Moonlord one, I'm not sure. Now that it's done, I want to head back to the ocean to kill Duke Fishron some more. I'm on the serious grind for these Fishron wings, and I'm kind of shocked I haven't gotten any yet. I need at least 3 pairs, 1 for each of my builds, or else the difference in flight time and speed could really hurt me while switching between them. I also want to get Betsy wings if I can, but I think I'm probably done with the Old One's army for this month. What's sad though is that I still managed to die to Duke Fishron. I have figured out his pattern much better, but during this fight my Shield of Cthulhu bonked a Tornado Shark and launched me backwards into Duke, and well, that's a problem. I should get Master Ninja gear for the Mage build. It wasn't until last month that I really started using Mage, so it's been a bit neglected. One problem with Mage, however, is the fact that once you run out of mana, there really isn't a great way to get it back unless there's enemies who drop mana stars for you. With Duke, that isn't impossible since the sharks can drop them, but I keep using the bubble gun for its greater damage against Duke and thus kill fewer sharks most of the time and run out of mana. I grabbed a mana regen potion to fix this problem, but the more I think about it, the more necessary I feel the mana regen potion is to use as a mage. Unless you want to constantly chug mana potions and decrease your damage, that is, but I don't want to do that. With mana regen, I took down Duke 2 more times before dying after glancing at chat during livestream, and the total 2 seconds I looked away was enough for him to blow me away. Worse yet, none of the Dukes so far have dropped the Fishron wings. I only had 1 more truffle worm at this point, so I decided it was time to test the Flying Dragon in a real situation. In the end, this weapon didn't impress me. It pierces and goes through blocks and has higher damage output than the Terrablade, but it still couldn't hold a candle to my Mage build. Maybe Mage is just that broken, I don't know. But also, this probably isn't the most ideal situation for the Flying Dragon, and after trying it underground later, I found a greater appreciation for it. Without another truffle worm to my name, I had to go and hunt for more. Only problem is, they're nowhere to be seen. I have the shell phone, so it tells me when they're nearby, but for the first 5 or 8 minutes, none responding at all. Eventually a few came, but this was really odd. Ever since 1.4.4, or maybe even a little earlier, these little buddies have become a lot easier to find, and it wasn't half as hard as last time. Something weird must be going on, but I got several worms that I could use. There was one minor grind session, but I suppose I'll return to the major one, which is farming for a Rod of Discord and a Hollow Key. While I'm at it, since I haven't gotten a single biome chest key drop on this world, unless it was somewhere off screen and I never saw it. I maxed out spawns as much as I could with battle potions, water candle, blood moon, and reached about 260 chaos elemental kills, but still no rod. This is just further affirming why I never bother with this thing in a typical run, but I did start to get a bunch of banners I've never had before, which was really cool, including an enchanted sword one, a cochineal cochineal beetle and Tim. Before finishing the week, I waited around the ocean for a saucer to spawn. Please, Relogic, add a way to summon these guys, please. And when they did come, I found myself struggling once again. I feel like I've been doing a lot worse against these guys on this world than any other I've played. Maybe it really is just Master Mode or something. Do the saucers normally drop these spark things? Is that a newer addition? Maybe that's it. I don't remember these being a problem in the past. Whatever the reason, I managed to clutch one of them for the laser machine gun, which I'll have to test next week, and I got the summon weapon. I think that makes me 50-50 for killing them, even though they killed me one extra time. It also means, if I remember right, every saucer has dropped a different weapon, which is just bizarre to me, and I wish it worked that way with everything. Week 3 of the month, and I've come to realize the only things I have planned to do are the same things I've been doing every other week. It's the season to grind out the items I've been looking for and keep running into the wall that is the Old One's army. I'd never put this much work into these things during a regular run, but what else am I going to do other than this? So I head on over to the Old One's army arena because I really want to get Betsy's mage weapon, since mage is my favorite class, and as I mentioned before, I've never beaten Betsy pre-Moonlord other than the one time last week. So I want to get to use her mage weapon while it's still on tier. I also figured that I have pretty much figured out the best strategy for beating the Old One's army, so I didn't expect this to take too long. During this round, I even used the laser machine gun I got last week. I wasn't sure if it'd still be useful or able to keep up with the other mage weapons I had, and I was surprised to find out it definitely holds up. It would seem to me that it can do a little more damage than the razor blade to single targets and does just a little less damage than the bubble gun. But it has the benefit of having a much longer range, so I actually see this weapon as being just as good as the other two, just perhaps a different use case. I made it to Betsy and whipped out my icicle staff expecting an easy victory, only for the dragon to demolish the crystal right as I got her to half health. And half health really isn't that much. I'd have to do much better if I were going to win, and yet I was half full because that was the same strategy I'd used last time to win, but now I was wallowing in defeat and by a large margin. Before fighting them again, I used the vast amount of defender medals I had managed to collect to purchase the Valhalla armor set. I don't plan on using it, I just really like how it looks. So once I bought it, I put it on a mannequin because grinding for these medals for a decoration is definitely worth it. Oh well. I also purchased the Defender's Forge just for the heck of it. I think I've bought this one time before after grinding the Old One's army because I was curious as to what this thing was. I know it's basically just another safe or piggy bank, and this confuses me to this day because there really isn't a need for another one of these. With the next Old One's army, I decide to adjust my strategy slightly. Rather than use the icicle staff, which is hard to aim for the Betsy fight, I would use the laser machine gun. It's a whole lot easier to aim and has a comparable damage output. And when I tried it, I was initially pretty happy since it was killing Betsy a whole lot faster. But I had overlooked the fact that the icicles from the staff that missed Betsy went down to rain icy justice upon the enemies, destroying the crystal. A laser machine gun, of course, does not do that. So although I was killing Betsy a little faster, they were breaking the crystal like it was made of glass, and so that attempt failed as well. In the next one, I got a bit too comfortable and died, and there's no recovering from that at this point, and I'm getting a bit burned out of the Old One's army, so I head back to the Hollow to continue farming for the Rod of Discord. That extraordinarily rare item everyone else seems to love, but I see little point to. I drink a battle potion and run around for a bit, and 2 minutes later, what would happen to drop but the Rod of Discord itself? Well, that's really nice. I admit I was really excited to get it and decided to teleport until the debuff killed me because I was happy to have it, but at the same time, I still don't get the hype around this thing. It's handy, sure, and some people find use for it against Moonlord, but I always forget to use it in my day-to-day in this game, and as I mentioned before, I struggle using it against Moonlord. I got it though, and I guess that's what I was going for. I returned to the Old One's army and learned that ogres do a whole lot of damage with their clubs. Noted. I decided to get a flame burst staff, figuring it'd be good against some of the flying enemies. The ballistas are my favorite, but I think they struggle with the flying guys, so hopefully adding the flame burst staff will better my odds next time I take on the army, but for now I'm turning my attention to Duke Fishron, whose wings I'm still looking to acquire, and it's hard to describe just how frustrated Duke Fishron is making me. I killed him 5 more times, and still didn't get a single Fishron wing. Before fighting him again, it occurred to me stars in a bottle help with mana regen, and I talked about how the mana regen potion is essential to the mage, and I figured adding these stars in a bottle should help. I never remember to use them, so I have no idea how well they work, but after fighting the Duke again, they are almost as good as mana regen potions, all on their own, so that's good to know. Although, it seemed inconsistent because sometimes I'm pretty sure I had the buff and it would go at 1 speed and sometimes it would go slow. I don't know. I only discovered that next week and I didn't feel like talking about it next week. It's weird, but I think it just makes it so your mana regen is as fast as it is when you're standing without these things, but now while you're moving, did that make any sense? Oh well. But Duke Fishron, my boy, my favorite boss of the game, I kept killing him over and over and over again and still got nothing. I was just about to lose my mind. Thing is too, I played this week right on the tail of finishing a run with the Goose Virus and got 2 Fishron wings out of 4 kills. And also that video is coming out next week. And now I've killed Fishron, I don't even know how many times, and I haven't gotten 1. Worse yet, I want 3 pairs of these wings, 1 for each build. After grinding for what felt like forever, I finally got a pair. And afterwards, chat informed me that the bestiary tells you how many times you've killed a mob, and it turns out I've taken Duke Fishron down 20 times and just got 1 pair of wings. So help me, Betsy's mage weapon better not give me the same odds as this monstrosity. Speaking of, I spawned the army again, this time using magic power and regen in the hopes that these potions would be enough to clear out Betsy, and although they did help and I nearly took her down, still wasn't enough and I tasted defeat once again. At this point I was desperate. I had to figure out how to win once again, so I grabbed one of the few wrath potions I had on hand and added it to the other potions I had. It wasn't much, but it was one of the only ways I could think of increasing my damage output. At long last, I claimed a second victory over the army. My heart raced as I readied myself for the mage weapon I was hoping for, but instead I ended up with the bow. It's cool, but based on its attack pattern alone, I don't see this being useful for anything but the old one's army. That feels unproductive to me, to get a weapon from an event for the event. But the strategy did work, so I went fishing for hemopiranhas and even koi so I could make enough potions for the many Old One's army battles that may be in my future. But after I caught 10 of each of them, I went to put them away and realized I already had a bunch. Oops. And at last, I finished this week farming for a desert or hollow key, or really any key. I still haven't gotten a single one of them to drop. Well, time for more of the same. I can't get the drops I want, so I guess I'll just keep doing the same things over and over again. Thankfully, the truffle worms weren't nearly as elusive as they have been in the past, and I got 10 of them in a relatively short time, which of course means it's time to continue fighting the pigfish, because I still need 2 more Fishron wings. The first fight made me real excited since I got my second pair of Fishron wings, and after farming this guy 20 times just to get one, getting the second one immediately after feels really good. But it also messed with my expectations something fierce, because after 9 more fights, I still didn't get a third pair of these stinking wings. But on the bright side, I won 9 out of the 10 battles, which is an improvement on my previous performances. It's too bad I didn't get the third pair of wings, but maybe I'll just save that for next month or something. Right now, I'm feeling the desire to build a fancy elevator. Right now really isn't the right time to do that, really, considering I don't hardly use the elevator, but I've never made a fancy looking elevator by hand before, so I used smooth marble and sky blocks and got most of the initial outline done, and I plan on using gray brick and muted gemspark block for the build. Maybe it's pretty similar to the trophy room, but I love how that looks, so that's why I'm making this build so similar. Only problem is I'll have to tear apart another marble biome in all likelihood. After getting the outline done, I needed some more high-octane action, so obviously I returned to the Old One's army. I really want to get the mage weapon, Betsy drops, and if I could get Betsy wings as well, that'd be awesome. The first fight didn't go very well, though, after I lost focus for a hot second. On the return trip, I prepared with all kinds of potions and was more careful than last time. Things went a whole lot smoother, and I made it to Betsy, and I figured with all these potions, including some I hadn't used in previous victories I had over Betsy, there was no reason I could think of that would prevent me from coming out on top, but sure enough, I lost the battle. I was baffled. I wasn't even performing poorly or anything. I was hitting Betsy consistently. There's no reason I should have lost. I was so perplexed that I thought of using a different strategy. I ran off to the jungle to gather more chlorophyte and visited the truffle for the first time in forever. I nearly forgot this biome exists. I didn't even own an auto hammer. I've even been considering making the hoverboard since I don't ever make that, but I have Fishron wings now, so there's not really a point in the hoverboard anymore. It probably has less flight time, though I guess I haven't used it in forever, so I'm not sure. Let me know. The reason I need the Shroomite was so I could craft the Arrow Shroomite armor set. See, the strategy I'm thinking of for the Old One's army is to use the Ranger with a focus on using the Aerial Bane, the bow Betsy drops. After testing it out, it strikes me as the kind of weapon that excel at events, so of course it should work quite well against the Old One's army. I started the battle using the bow and Ranger build, but I was already struggling in the first wave. But this bow excels mostly when I can hit an aerial enemy with other enemies below me, so I stuck to the mage until Betsy spawned. I was really hoping it would do so well at killing the enemies on the ground that I'd have extra time to kill Betsy, what with this bow's lower single target DPS. It's a cool bow, and it has a cool effect, but it simply wasn't enough, even with all the potions I brought along. I really am scratching my head at this point. It would seem to me that I can't consistently win this battle and I more or less have to play it perfectly, which is too hard to do consistently with the Icicle Staff. I fought the Duke 2 more times, but still didn't get the final pair of wings I need, and I finish off the week and the month in the desert in the hopes of fishing up an oyster that drops a pink pearl. I don't really need a Galaxy Pearl for anything, but I've never gotten it, and I still think it's a bit absurd how rare it is, which of course means I didn't get it this time. Oh well. This month was filled with a lot of rinse and repeat, perhaps more so than any other month, and yet I wouldn't say I was bored or annoyed. It was still fun the entire time. It's confirming two things for me, and that is that ignoring certain parts of the game due to bad drop rates is a perfectly rational thing to do because sometimes that RNG is out to get ya. I'm doing this run to do all the things I don't normally do, but at the same time, playing the game in such a way where you don't always have to get a certain item drop is really nice. It's just that I find farming for these things weirdly fun during this run. Maybe that's just because I'm not in a rush to make a video about it or to beat the game. I don't know. It's nice. This month has also confirmed to me that the Old One's army could really use a nerf. At least the third tier could, because it's absurd how difficult it is. I'm not entirely sure what I could do to increase my strength, and worse yet, actually beating this thing doesn't give you all that great a reward. The Flying Dragon is an upgrade to the Terrorblade, so that's fine, but the bow is basically only useful for the army itself at this point, and it's not even good enough for that. Who knows how good the mage weapon is, since I can't get my hands on that, but man, Old One's army is tough. I do have a plan though for how I'm going to deal with the Old One's army, and you can join me for that. I will be live streaming the next week of 1 Year 1 World right here on YouTube later today at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. So join me as we finish up the spooky month and wrap up 1 Year 1 World in the month of October.